am the wind that tears your sails. I am the water that covers your graves. I am all of November's storm. Those who first sailed these limpid waters believed themselves safe from my storms and danger, only to be thrown overboard in sudden, furious gales of rolling gray water. Many a ship has been wrecked in my storms. I hurled the Philo Scoville ashore in October of 1889. I drowned the Captain Grady in my brewing surf. I am the gales and blizzards of Georgian Bay that have shifted sadistically from the northwest to the northeast, sinking the Ditch, the W.L. Wetmore, the Marion L. Breck, and many, many more. I test those who sail the ships, calling into question their fantasies of invincibility, reminding them of all they have to lose. They must escape my elements before the hurrying centers of my storm ignite. From heaven's height, the sky turns dark and gray. The wind begins to howl. Tops of pines bend and battered branches blow. Water forms wells fathoms deep, pounding and grinding against the shoreline, battering the rocks, transforming them into pebbles. Now arrives my most preferred event. Behind the white flash plunges the blast of a thunder crash. The sky rips open for torrents of rain to fall. At this moment, captains try to think of something to say. Words against the storm. Words. I have a word of warning to all of you. The lakes fall under my control. They remain unsafe to this day, because I am not a spirit of the past. I live on and on. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bruce Peninsula National Park and Fathom 5 National Marine Park. My name's Andrea Kettle. Can everyone hear me? At the back, too? Okay, great. Well, I'm one of the park interpreters up here at the Bruce Peninsula, and I often get asked, exactly what does an interpreter do? Because it's a very strange job title. Well, I can tell you what I don't do, because people often think I listen to the birds and the trees. They talk to me so that I can tell you what they're saying. I'm not that type of an interpreter. I don't translate languages. The only language I can speak is French, other than English. So don't think that, because it's not true. But what I do is I lead guided hikes through the national parks, and I'm here to answer any questions regarding the natural history of the area. It's my third season up here, and I'm probably one of the few people who can genuinely say that they adore their job. And one of the reasons I really like my job is because I love being able to share with visitors and my friends of all the neat things that are happening in and around the park. So before we begin tonight's show, I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the activities that are happening in the park, that are happening today and tomorrow. We have the park's news. That's still too bright. So the park news. Tomorrow, you're actually stuck with me for 2 hikes. The very first hike begins at 9 o'clock from the head of trails, and it's a hike that's titled Lakes Great and Small. We're going to walk around Horse Lake down to the often very exciting Georgian Bay shoreline. Is anybody out on the Georgian Bay shoreline today? Was it wavy? Yeah. That's what I heard. The tour boats to Flower Pot didn't run for a better part of the day because it was so wavy. So you know what I mean when I say exciting shoreline some days. So that's tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and it will last about an hour and a half. Tomorrow night, there's a hike titled sunset sensory hike at 7:30 from the head of trails. You have to be prepared to enter the twilight zone on this sunset hike. 7:30 at the head of trails. You have to remember, though, the sun's setting a lot earlier than it was in July, so it's going to be a race down to the shoreline between 7:30 and 8:30. So if you want to meet me at the head of trails, please bring a flashlight because we will probably be walking back in the dark. And as well, on Saturday morning, it's me again. No, I'm not the only interpreter who works in the park. I just have the lucky days of working Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. I'm leading a trek to Lord Hunt's Tunnel, and we're leaving from the head of trails again at 10 a.m. And this is an extended hike along the Georgian Bay shoreline to a place called the Hole in the Wall. And some of you may have been there before, and some of you may have no idea what I'm talking about. So if you don't know what the Hole in the Wall is and you're looking for something to do for the better part of the day Saturday, join me at 10. Good idea to bring a lunch because we're out for about 4 to 5 hours. And then to recuperate after a long strenuous hike on Saturday, you can come and watch April's show here at the Amphitheater at 9 p.m. She's talking about cliffhangers, all about the life on the cliff edge. So appropriately enough, on that title, I'll end my park news. And what we're going to be talking about tonight is Fathom 5 National Marine Park. And one of the reasons the storm that just blew through here is one of the reasons why we have a marine park here today. See, Fathom 5 Provincial Park was first established in 1972, and it became a national park in 1987. The whole reason Fathom 5 Provincial Park was established was to protect the many shipwrecks that lay scattered along the bottom of Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. There are over 21 shipwrecks in this area, and they have all been put there because of those gales of November. And you witnessed firsthand how really ugly, watch it, and nasty those gales of November can really be. And I personally think it's a strange coincidence that I've been the one to talk about shipwrecks and storms because I have a personal tie to a shipwreck. You see, I was actually named after one. In all honesty, I was named after a shipwreck. There was a boat, an ocean liner called the Andrea Kettle, which sank in 1956. I'm not that old, but that's when my mother was watching the news and heard for the first time the name Andrea. Because what happened was in 1956, the Andrea Kettle actually collided with another ocean liner, the Stockholm, on the Atlantic Ocean, and the Andrea Kettle sank. Well, when my mom heard this name and the title of the boat, she loved it so much that she decided that when she had a daughter, if she had a daughter, she would name her Andrea, and sure enough, she did. Sure enough, her daughter's now on stage talking about shipwrecks. So I kind of do really have a personal tie to a shipwreck. And I often get asked, do I think it's a curse? Well, days when I'm standing up on stage and it's rainy and cold, and I have to talk about shipwrecks, yes, I think it's a curse. But on nights like today, I think it's wonderful. And one of the reasons I particularly like shipwrecks is because they're culturally significant. They're the whole reason why we have a marine park here today. And not only are the shipwrecks culturally significant and important, so is the aquatic environment in which the shipwrecks have made into their new home. Because the aquatic environment is equally important, and that's what I'd like to talk about tonight, and life in the water. To do that, I thought that I should bring some things up with me so that you can try to understand why Fathom 5 is a special place and how it came to be. So the first thing I brought with me is something that makes Fathom 5 National Marine Park different from Bruce Peninsula National Park. What do you need to create a marine park? I heard you guys mumble. You have to help me out on this one. Water, that's right. You have lots and lots of water. So I brought a little bit of Georgian Bay up here with me tonight. Nice and clean, clear, quite cold. And you may know that we have lots and lots of water up here. The thing is, people come up to the Bruce Peninsula because it's well known for its high cliffs, its trees, its flowers, the animals. People forget about the water. They forget that when they're standing on top of those high cliffs of the Niagara Escarpment, that they're looking out into Georgian Bay, which drains into Lake Huron, one of the 5 Great Lakes. So I brought a map here to show you exactly where we are and how the Great Lakes actually drain. We have the most northern lake, Lake Superior, which drains down into Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. But Georgian Bay is actually attached to Lake Huron. It's this small, very deep body of water. And Tobermory is at the very tip of this finger of land. And then Lake Huron drains into Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. So you have to remember that all of these lakes are connected, and they always have to be viewed as one ecosystem or one environment. Whatever flows into Lake Superior will probably make its way down into Lake Ontario. So just bear that in mind. Let's put this back. Not the most portable map. You wouldn't want to carry it as a road map. All right, what's the second thing that makes our marine park special? Why did we have a marine park? Why was a marine park created in the first place back in 1972? What? That's right. Shipwrecks. That's right, shipwrecks. So we have lots and lots of shipwrecks. We have 21 shipwrecks to be exact. And I loved my shipwreck. Evidence of shipwrecks up here tonight. This is an anchor. This anchor, I'll be honest with you, it didn't come off one of the 21 shipwrecks that we have up here. I couldn't lift those. This is just one that I had my boss make for me. And the reason we have so many shipwrecks up here is not because we placed them here as a means of attracting visitors and tourists, but we have so many shipwrecks because of the storms and the gales of November. What would happen back in the late 1800s and early 1900s is that captains would push their ships and their crew to do one last run in the fall before the ice moved in for the winter. And you have to remember, back then they didn't have the same navigational aids that we have today. They didn't have the radar and the sat-nav. So they often relied on their instincts as a means of navigating. I've heard stories where captains would be on board, on deck, and they'd be smelling the air. And if they smelt white pine trees, or any sort of cedar trees, they would realize they were too close to land, and they'd veer away. I don't know about you, but that would be an awfully insecure feeling to know that the captain of the boat I was on was navigating with his nose. But they had to rely on their instincts and experience. And often, their instincts and experiences failed them. And they'd lose sight of the land, and they'd lose sight of the shoals, and they'd run aground, and their boats would sink. All of the shipwrecks that we do have up here are tied to the history of the Great Lakes. Most of the ships have been involved in the lumbering industries, carrying logs back and forth through the Great Lakes, or agriculture, or the extraction of any other natural resources. So they have a very strong link to the development of the Great Lakes. Because the ships were all caused, or the shipwrecks were all caused by storms, you can see how inseparable our maritime history is from the forces of nature. And that's something else that we should bear in mind tonight. Because that gale of November will always come back and haunt you. Hopefully it won't rain tonight. Right. Now, a marine park. What types of animals live in a marine park? What do we like to catch and fry up for dinner? Fishies. 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 We have fish. We up here, this, by the way, is a spotted striped lakefish. It bears no resemblance to any actual fish that you find in Georgian Bay and Lake Huron. It's my own artistic impression of a fish. And we have the species of fish up here we have tons and tons of them. We have whitefish, we have lake trout, we have pickerel, we have ciscoes, chubs, the list goes on and on. And if you ever want to have a good local dinner, eat whitefish in town, because that's what most of the commercial fishermen are catching these days. Now, fish are pretty interesting species. They're a lot different from you and I, because we see and hear with our eyes and our ears. Fish, however, don't use their eyes and ears very often. What they have are a series of special scales that run along their backside. And these scales form what's called a lateral line. And it's the lateral line, or the scales, that actually sense vibrations in the water. And that allows the fish to avoid obstacles, and it also allows the fish to sense other fish around them so that they can capture prey. And that's how they navigate through the waters. So I think they're pretty neat. Hopefully tonight we'll talk about other organisms other than fish that live in our marine park. Those are just one species. All right, what about Fathom 5? Who ever thought of its name? Any ideas how Fathom 5 National Marine Park was named? This is a tough question.
Is it 30 feet deep?
30 feet deep, that's a very good guess. 1 fathom equals 6 feet, so 6 times 5 is 30. The deepest part of Georgian Bay is 565 feet deep, close to 200 meters. So that's not a very accurate representation of it, the depth of the marine park. Good guess, though. I'm impressed. Anybody else? Any English majors?
Shakespeare.
Oh! Well, you know, I had to do some research, and I didn't know right away how Fathom 5 was named. So I went into our library, and when I was there, I actually ended up meeting the person who was responsible for naming the marine park. So bear with me. I'll go backstage, see if he's here, because he's probably far more eloquent to tell you how the marine park was named. I'll be right back.
I'm not sure if you can sit down. Yeah.
Good evening. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. So there you have the reason or the source of why Fathom 5 how Fathom 5 received its name. It was named after The Tempest, written by William Shakespeare. It's from one of his passages. So he was far better to present that than I was. I'm just going to get rid of this without having our very own shipwreck on stage. Oh boy. There we go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a closer look at Fathom 5 National Marine Park. Fathom 5, like we said, is located between Georgian Bay and Lake Huron, the triangle of islands that are off the tip of Tobermory. Far better slide is this slide that was taken by satellite, because it shows you the many islands that are incorporated into our marine park. There are 19 islands altogether. All of these islands are very different and special in their own sort of way. Probably the most unique island is Flower Pot. Many of you didn't make it out to Flower Pot Island today, but you'll see it tonight. Flower Pot is really special because it's the most accessible island to the public. We have walking trails and ferry boats that go out to the island. It's also special because of its 2 rock monolith structures that actually do resemble flower pots. And they even have white cedar trees growing out of the tips of them to just tie off that whole flower pot idea. So it is a wonderful island to explore. Another island in our marine park is called Bear's Rump Island. It's a little more inaccessible. If you have your own boat, it's a great place to tour around. Does that look like a bear's rump to you? What does it look like? Oh, whale. Do we have whales in Georgian Bay? What? No. Oh, I've never seen one. No, we don't have whales in Georgian Bay, so I think that's why Bear's Rump was named what it is today. Supposedly, if you look at it from the shoreline, it's supposed to look like a bear with its head down in the water fishing and its rump up in the air. And I think you need a pretty good imagination to get that out of that hunk of rock. Bear's Rump, though, does look like the Niagara Escarpment. It has extremely high cliffs on the one side, like the eastern side of our escarpment, and it's very flat and tapers off, just like our own, like the Niagara Escarpment. Those are some of our islands. What the marine park is trying to do is it's trying to protect the islands, it's trying to protect the life on the islands, and the water around the islands, and life in the water. the life in the water column that I'm most interested in talking about. And that's because my favorite course at university was limnology, which is the study of freshwater ecosystems. And so, to be able to really talk about Fathom 5 National Marine Park, the best way to do it is to go out and explore the marine park for yourselves. And I thought, well, how do I do that? I have to go and explore it so that I can share all my findings with you. The only way to do that is by boat. Now, I don't have a boat. Or I should say, I didn't have a boat. I had to muster up all my courage, and I had to go to my boss, and I explained to him that I really needed a boat if I was supposed to do my job well at the Amphitheater show, because I had to go and explore the marine park. You know, I'm sure all of you know, budgets are tight these days, and I was really nervous, and I was sure I wasn't going to be getting my boat. I thought I'd just have to make do with slides. Sure enough, my boss phoned me up one day, and he said he had great success. He ended up getting me my trusty research vessel. You have to bear with me because this vessel has been everywhere, and it's my pride and joy. I'm so happy with my trusty vessel. It's taken me everywhere. So, we'll just put my boat down. Before we go anywhere, though, we need a few safety supplies. And I never go anywhere without my captain's hat. All right. Now, the one thing that we do, though, is I want to secure my boat. So I'm going to throw my very high-tech anchor overboard. And before I get in my water, just make sure I dim the lights enough. Now I'm going to hop in my boat. And you have to remember that as my anchor is flowing down into the water column, it's passing through many different layers of water that vary in temperature and light intensity. And you may have experienced that change in temperature yourselves if you've actually jumped into Georgian Bay. The water is nice and warm around your shoulders, but it's freezing cold around the tips of your toes. And that's because the sunlight actually doesn't penetrate deep down into the water column. It doesn't penetrate all the way down to the bottom. So it's very, very cold and very dark at the bottom of Georgian Bay, or any large lake for that matter. What happens in the summertime is the lake actually layers or stratifies, sort of into 3 layers like a chocolate layer cake. You can relate better to food. There's a good example. Now, to be able to explain to you how the lake actually does layer or differentiate into 3 stratas, I need 3 volunteers. How about you right there? Yep, you. And you right there in the grave. And then somebody else at the back. How's that big arm at the back? Yep, that one who's hesitating. Sure. Or wait, do I have, oh, whoa. Okay, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. There. My eyes are shut. Okay, good. So I'm just going to hop out of my boat since my boat's now secure. You guys are going to help me show how a lake is layered, how Georgian Bay is layered. Now my very first layer is going to be the very top of Georgian Bay. So what is your name? Cassidy? Okay, Cassidy, can I ask you to stand up on that chair? Just be careful so you don't slip. We'll turn on some lights for you. Now Cassidy is going to have a little bit of a name change. Cassidy is the very top layer of Georgian Bay. And it's very, very warm, the top layer of Georgian Bay, because the sun warms it up. And that top layer is called epilimnion. So everybody has to say it. Epilimnion. Epilimnion. Not only science class, it's English too. So Cassidy doesn't forget who she is. She's now epilimnion. And I said that the top layer is warmed up by the sun. So, you know how powerful the sun is. Cassidy, you're going to have to protect your eyes from the sun. Those going to stay on you? You sure? Without holding them? And then, well, you're going to need one hand because we all know that Georgian Bay can get very, very wavy. And all the waves are caused by the wind action. So you have to pretend that you're being circulated by the wind that covers over Georgian Bay. And you're nice and warm, okay? You okay, Cassidy? Or should I say epilimnion? Okay. And what's your name? Yep. Andrew. Oh, you're the male version of the Andrew Dorian. Okay, Andrew, you have another name. You're going to be the middle layer, and the middle layer is called thermocline. All right. I don't know, you guys are sounding a little sleepy tonight. So thermocline, there you go, Andrew. And the thermocline layer is actually the barrier zone. It's a zone of transition where the temperature, so here's some barrier caution tape if you want to hold that out for everyone. It's a zone of transition where the temperature changes from very, very warm to very, very cold, but we haven't got there yet, in a very, very short distance. So that's when you're diving, when you're scuba diving up here, you hit the thermocline zone at about 35 feet, and the temperature usually drops about 4 to 5 degrees. It's very cold quickly. Now, what's your name? Megan. Megan? Oh, Megan, you're looking like you're a little scared of what I'm going to do to you. Are you doubting that you wanted to volunteer? No. Okay. Oh, okay. All right, Megan, you are called the hypolimnion. Okay, hypolimnion. Now, Megan, you're the bottom layer. So can I ask you to sit down on the stage? Okay. The hypolimnion is the cold, very cold, just to bundle you up so you don't catch cold when you're down in the hypolimnion. Cold and very, very dark layer. And just so you don't get lost when you're down exploring the hypolimnion, we'll give you some light so you can find your way. Is that okay? Yeah. So there we have our 3 layers of water that vary in temperature and light intensity that occur in Georgian Bay during the summertime and also during the winter time. The warm hypolimnion layer, the zone of transition, the thermocline, the very cold, dark, uncirculating hypolimnion. What happens, though, is that summer comes to an end. And when summer comes to an end, the air temperature, and we're already experiencing this, gets very cold. The air temperature gets cold, the water starts to get colder. And that means that the epilimnion layer slowly starts to get cold. As the water gets colder, it gets heavier. That's one of the properties of water. Cold water is more dense than warm water, which means that the epilimnion layer slowly starts to filter down. So I have to ask the epilimnion to hop off her chair, and the epilimnion just follows me down because she virtually travels all the way south and bumps the hypolimnion layer out of the way. What happens is the lake actually turns over. Now, this took a while to think, how am I going to get 3 volunteers to flip around on stage? So I decided the best way to show you how the lake overturns is to ask my volunteers, I'm going to take these off from you so you don't hurt yourself. I'm going to ask my volunteers to do a little 2-step on stage. You're going to swing your arms round and round and change positions in a figure 8, okay? And to do this, to inspire them, we're going to have to do-si-do and clap. So I'm going to ask you to stand up, hypolimnion, and I'm going to take this out of your way. And you know what I mean? I mean to go like this. You're going to swing your arms round and round and change positions. So come on, guys, you have to change positions. And when I say stop, you have to stop. Come on. Right, Alex. Okay, change round. Okay, stop. No. Okay, now stop. Okay, great. So now we're all mixed up. That was beautiful, by the way. Nice dancing skills. Now, what has happened is that the water has become all one temperature. As the air temperature gets colder and winter progresses, or the winter gets nearer, the water temperature slowly becomes all the same temperature, usually around 4 degrees, and it all mixes together. So we'll take off all your name tags because you are all named giant water column with no specific layers. And that overturning effect actually occurs in the fall and in the spring. So what we just showed, or what you've actually just showed, is how the layers of water actually stratify. It's called thermal stratification. It's a big word to simply mean the layers of water break down into layers because of temperature differences.
You guys did a really good job of that because I know it gets confusing, especially when you have to learn some fast dance steps on stage. So let's give them a round of applause. Thank you very much. Now, when I set my boat out, I really wanted to talk about the various species or animals that live out in the marine park. And when I did set my high trusty boat research vessel out, I also decided that I'd set my high-tech trusty fishing line. And here we have a string, which means that I must have caught something. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly, hopefully, wheel in the catch of the day. You never know what you're going to pull in when you're up traveling around Georgian Bay. It's heavy, making lots and lots of noise. I don't know what it possibly could be. Does anybody have any guesses? Food rope, food chain, cardboard. Who said cardboard? So we'll just turn this around so you guys can see. Somebody had the right answer, and the right answer was not cardboard. The right answer was food chains. Whoever said that gets an A. What you have is probably a fisherman's best catch of the year. An entire, literal food chain. And on my food chain, I actually ended up catching a lake trout by the tail, which is probably an unusual catch in itself. And lake trout are the top predators. They could be considered like the lions of the lake or the kings of the lake. And lake trouts will eat anything that's smaller than themselves, including another top predator, the whitefish. Those tasty dinners that you get in Tobermory. And whitefish will eat any small fish, like these small, shiny alewives. And alewives eat really strange things. They eat things that are called zooplankton that look like microscopic sea animals, and phytoplankton, microscopic small pieces of vegetation that are floating around in the water column. I also have something really very unusual on my food chain. Does everyone see this? No. Oh, you're going to have to get up then. So what this is, I'll describe it. I'll use my wonderful descriptive techniques. It's black and it's white and it's striped. All right, a zebra mussel. It's a zebra mussel. And why would a zebra mussel be attached to my food chain? They're attached to everything. Very good. Okay, they're attached to everything, and maybe I'll address that issue in a little while. Before we address the issue of zebra mussels, I'm going to do a quick review of our food chain. And basically, we have large fish eat medium-sized fish, eat very small, tasty fish, which eat or get their vitamins and their nutrients from eating things like zooplankton and phytoplankton. This zebra mussel, well, it's worth an explanation all on its own. Zebra mussels. Is that too bright? Can you see that slide? Okay. See, if I turn them all off, I'm going to fall off the stage. There we go. Zebra mussels attach to everything. They do. We have had zebra mussels up in Lake Huron and Georgian Bay for the last 3 years. And they do attach to everything. Zebra mussels first came from the Baltic. What happened was they were transported in the ballast water of a ship. The ballast water is what a ship takes if they're not carrying a cargo. It's what allows the ship to keep its balance when it's crossing the ocean. Because we can now cross the oceans far faster than ever before, zebra mussels or any organisms that are in that water on board the ship survive the journey. And if they're adaptable, they'll actually survive in their new environment. And that's exactly what happened with zebra mussels. The ballast water was dumped, and they've entered the Great Lakes. They're here to stay, and they're reproducing at an astronomically high rate. And the reason they've been successful reproducing or spreading is because we don't have any natural predators here to eat them. So they are sticking on to everything, and they're reproducing very, very quickly. The concern with those zebra mussels with respect to our food chain is that they're eating the very same things as these small little alewives and any small fish. They're eating things like rotifers, which is a type of zooplankton. Now you have to remember, because if you saw this, you'd probably never go back in the water ever again. This has been magnified thousands of times for your viewing pleasure. These little organisms are so small you would never know that they're in the water, but they really are there. And wait, watch out. You'll never go in the water after this. It's a copepod. And copepods are another species of zooplankton. And again, they're very, very small. They'll do no harm to you, so don't fear the water after this show. Please, that's the last thing I intend. Serrations are a type of phytoplankton, also eaten by zebra mussels because they're filter feeders and they remove anything that's any small particles that are floating within the water column. The other fear with the zebra mussels is that they do what? Stick on to everything. They stick on to things even like our shipwrecks. And that's a big fear up here because they're not as thick as this particular slide. This slide was taken down in Lake Erie, where they have had zebra mussels for close to 10 years, since 1986, 9 years. And they have spread, and they're coating their wrecks. It's forecasted that our wrecks may look like this within the next 10 years, which is a little bit of a shame, but these are changes that are happening within the Great Lakes ecosystem. Zebra mussels also stick on to other aquatic organisms like this crayfish, and that's a big concern as well. You see, we have done a fair bit to alter the aquatic ecosystem of the Great Lakes. And the sources of disturbance range from pollution to fishing, which changes the species composition of the Great Lakes. We used to have a lot of those lake trout floating around. Today we have very few because they've been fished or overfished. To the introduction of exotic species like these zebra mussels that have successfully spread throughout the ecosystem. I think the lesson to be learned here is that globally, things move around. And I like the way one of our wardens worded it best. A lake can't be considered like an isolated fishbowl. The Great Lakes are all connected, and we saw that on the map earlier on tonight. And they should be viewed as one ecosystem where the water and the land, the air, and the animals can roam around freely without fear of any of these changes. People often ask how they can help. One of the ways we can help, so you guys are here tonight. That's the first step. All of you know now about zebra mussels. And so if you are boat owners, or if you go and tell your friends who are boat owners to scrub down their boats before, if their boat has been in a Great Lake, before they transport it to an inland lake, that's going to stop the further spread of zebra mussels. You see, the small veliger larval stage of the zebra mussel sticks onto the hulls of boats, and it can survive out of water for up to 72 hours. So even if you think you've left your canoe out in the sun, that nothing would survive, that's not true. If you've been out canoeing on Georgian Bay and now you want to go into Cyprus Lake, make sure you give your boat a big scrub down. And I know Cyprus Lake doesn't have any zebra mussels yet in it. And we can probably prevent that from happening if we all work together as partners. So let's try to bear that in mind. That's one of the ways we can help. Another way we can help is simply by having a park up here. The national parks are trying to learn as much as they possibly can about zebra mussels. And they're actually doing a considerable amount of research. Oh, I skipped the slide. Our Great Lakes slide. We were talking about the disturbances. I meant to show that slide. I'm sorry. So that shows you how all the Great Lakes are connected. The research that's going on in the park is not only about zebra mussels, it's also just general information that we're learning about on a day-to-day basis in Georgian Bay. And last year we had this ship, the Cormorant, up here in Tobermory, and the Cormorant was here to discover or explore the bottom of Georgian Bay. And Georgian Bay, I mentioned earlier, is 565 feet deep. 200 meters is far too deep for anybody to go down on scuba equipment, so we never knew what was down there. And on board the Cormorant, they have the latest technology. I was a little bit upset when I saw this slide and compared it to my trusty research vessel. But I have to admit, their technology is a little more advanced than mine. They had on board what's called a side-scanning sonar machine. And that's a yellow dolphin-shaped instrument that's being lowered into the water. And this sonar actually is lowered down and it sends a beam. And that beam bounces off the bottom of Georgian Bay. And somebody has the lucky job of reading the transmission or the printout from that beam. So somebody gets to stay inside the boat, nice and warm and dry, and reads what this machine is telling it. They never thought they'd find anything. They just thought they'd find a bunch of rocks and interesting geological formations. Well, their first transmission was very, very obscure. It looked like this. When I first looked at this, I thought it looked like a photocopier, bad photocopy gone mad. But it actually has some meaning to somebody who knows what the graph is saying. Where the squiggly lines look like a thumbprint, so somebody who has a keen eye, that was viewed as a possible ship because it looks like the curved front bow of a boat. So that means there would have been a boat down in the 100 meters depth range of Georgian Bay. And that was copied by the sonar machine. Well, that raised enough curiosity that they decided to let the sonar pass over that area again. And the second transmission they received looked like this, which definitely, even to me, looks a little bit more like a boat. It's got the pointed bow and the curved back stern end. That definitely raised enough curiosity that they went to their next level of technology, which is a mini submarine or submersible. And this is the same submersible that was involved in the discovery of the Titanic or the exploration of the Titanic. This submersible contains or is outfitted to hold 2 people, and these 2 navigators were lowered down to the 100 meters and off they went exploring. The one thing we never realized was that down at 100 meters, visibility is almost 0%. They couldn't see anything. I don't know about you, but if you've gone swimming in Georgian Bay, it's very, very clear. In the first maybe even 40 meters, it's pretty clear. Down at 100 meters, it's horrible, supposedly. So they were wandering around in 100 meters, and they were lost. They had no idea where to go. And they didn't know what they were looking for. Sure, this sonar machine thought there might be a shipwreck, but they didn't know where to begin looking. So they were traveling around, and slowly their air time was running out. They hadn't found anything yet. But then they had a little bit of an accident. They ended up ramming into something, and they hit it whatever they hit so hard that they broke one of the red lights. Sure enough, when one of the navigators went and looked out the porthole window, he saw words written in 100 meters of water. Those words said, the Thomas R. Scott. They had accidentally run directly into the shipwreck that they weren't sure was even there in the first place. And not only did they hit the shipwreck, they hit it right below the actual nameplate or title. So they didn't even have to figure out what ship they hit. Talk about making your job easy. So the Thomas R. Scott was last seen leaving Manitoulin Island in 1914, and it's been missing for up to 80 years up until last July. That shows you, I should tell you, that the Thomas R. Scott is located outside of the park boundaries. It's located further south towards Cabot Head, between 100 and 110 meters of water. So if there are any very curious scuba divers, that is far too deep for any scuba diver to go, so please don't attempt it. And it's also, we don't have the coordinates of its whereabouts, exact coordinates. But that shows you how much is out there and the potential for discovery. There are many, many wrecks that have gone missing, and we know the approximate year, but we have no idea where they're located presently. The other thing that we discovered when the cormorant was here was a geological proof of an old drainage route. It was always speculated for many years that about 5 million years ago, let me make sure I get this straight, Lake Huron actually drained into Georgian Bay, which is the reverse drainage pattern as what occurs today. If that was going to be the case, then we needed that route, something maybe comparable to Niagara Falls, to allow the flow of water from Lake Huron into Georgian Bay. Sure enough, when the cormorant was here and they were using their sonar machines, they actually found what's called a spillway, and it would have been a fast-flowing set of water rapids comparable to the Ottawa River. So I'm sure back 5 million years ago, we had some very exciting animals rapiding down the river. And the printout, this was something difficult to explain, the printout looks like this. And what this means is everywhere where there's a bump in the graph, there would have been a stream of rock, a big pile of rock. And to understand this graph, you have to use your imaginations and envision the flow of water flowing out of the screen onto you, the audience. And tons of water would be flowing down from Lake Huron into Georgian Bay. And it would be traveling 1,000 meters. That's how long it was. And it's located at about 40 meters of depth in between the Tobermory and Flower Pot Island. It's called a spillway. It's not like Niagara Falls because it's not a giant drop-off. It's a gradual decline where the water would have flowed. And what was interesting was that at the very bottom of the spillway, gravel ripples. And you have to imagine as the water, all of this water is pounding down this river. It's eroding away bits of rock and anything that's underlying the riverbed. And it's transporting it to 1,000 meters. The very base of the spillway, they had these ripples of gravel that are still there, or rock that are still there today, which shows you how little circulation occurs in that cold, deep, dark hypolimnion. So that's even more proof of what I was trying to show you earlier on. This just shows you where all of our neat findings occurred. We have the shipwreck around Cabot Head, further south, the abandoned spillway off of a place called Demp's Point and Flower Pot Island. The one thing I didn't mention was a pop-up on the east side of Echo Island. And the pop-up is about 4 meters high, and what it is, it's a shift in the tectonic plates, or the bedrock, came together and literally just popped up. And that just shows you that we are on a tectonic fault line up here. And that was a new finding as well. So we have a lot of neat things in this area, and I'm very happy that we have a park here to preserve them, so that allows the research to continue. Research is going on all across Canada. And we have Canada as a country is a country of many different lands and many different waters. And we don't know, as Canadians, we can't possibly know all of these lands and waters because our country is so huge. So if you bear with me, we'll do a really quick tour across our own country so that we can explore some of the diversity that exists within Canada and some of the neat things that are in our other marine parks across the country. The very first place we're going to go is out to the west coast to a place called Guahanas National Marine Park Reserve. It's a wonderful place because the mountains fall directly down into the water. It has great wildlife, like killer whales on a nice rainy day. Beautiful scenery. Guahanas was established in 1987. Again, it's relatively new. It's the same age as Fathom 5. And if we travel a little further south along the Pacific coast, we get to Pacific Rim National Marine Park Reserve. And it's very different. It's flat, sort of like the Lake Huron shoreline. And it's well known for its broken island archipelago, its series of islands, and also its diversity of wildlife, like gray whales. Try to say that quickly. Gray whales. Scuba divers, find them everywhere. Starfish. Wolf eels. Now you thought a copepod was scary. Try to see a wolf eel underwater. And even fur seals. So the diversity really, really varies. Now if we travel a little further closer to home, to the province of Quebec, we arrive at the Saguenay-St. Lawrence estuary. It's a giant fjord area that's been eroded away or carved out by the passage of the glaciers. And it's well known because it's a sanctuary for beluga whales, the small white whale. They're really wonderful to see. Other starfish, you also find them everywhere. Now, if we explore our own marine park, the best way to do that, that's me, is by diving. And we get to go down and we see our own shipwrecks. We see anchors, a little larger than my own anchor. And this is located off a Big Tub Lighthouse in a place called the Gap. It's in about 70 feet of water, 25 meters. Very difficult to find underwater. Other shipwrecks, the sweepstakes, for any of you who have been over the wrecks on one of the tour boats. This is the Sweepstakes, which is a wonderful wreck to explore because it's very, very intact. And our shipwrecks in this area are intact because the water is so cold, the wood hasn't begun to oxidize yet. So if there's any country that should be shaped by water, it's Canada. So we have the Arctic up north, we have the Atlantic to the east coast, and the Pacific to the west coast. So water has played an integral part in the formation of our own country and probably in the lives of most Canadians. The one problem I think that we have is that Canadians tend to take water for granted. And I don't think we've done enough to secure the future of our water resources. Probably we haven't done enough because we do take it for granted, and that happens often. Parks Canada would like to try and change the attitudes of Canadians towards our water resources. We'd like to, in the future, represent 29 marine regions across our country. I can only get this slide in French. Far more visible than the other slide I had. And the marine regions vary across the whole country. Presently, we are only representing 5 marine regions in our 4 aquatic parks. The bottom line is, our picture isn't complete. And I think we can go the distance simply having visitors like yourselves coming to the park and sharing the knowledge with other visitors. And on that note, what I'd really like to remind you of is when you go home tonight, or when you go home after your camping trip up here, you are taking a little bit of Fathom 5 with you. You might not realize this, but you've sat here tonight, you've breathed in the moisture of the air, or you've been rained on in the last week, or you went swimming out in Georgian Bay. So you're taking some of that water home with you. Just be good to it, because it's going to be recycled and you never know where it's going to end up. So always remember to be good to the water, and that's what I'd like to try to share with you tonight. So I just want to now remind you of our sunset hike tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. if anybody's interested. And if you have any questions, I'm going to be here for the next little while, so please feel free to come up and ask me. Have a good night.